All right, let's get started. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Oblong Books. I'm very excited for this event tonight. We have our amazing local author, Gail Straub, with her new memoir, and Carla Goldstein from Omega Institute today in conversation with each other. And we're very excited to have you. Just a few words of housekeeping before we start. We will sell the book afterwards right over here. There will also be an opportunity to have your copy signed after. And we have a lot of interesting events coming up in the next couple of weeks that you can all find on our website. Later this week, we have an event on Thursday, and we're also going to be at Poughkeepsie Pride on Saturday. So we have a track full of fun, interesting stuff coming up for us. But tonight, the focus is on this book, Home Inside the Globe. And I'm so excited to have you two, to listen to you two. And without further ado, I will give the stage to you. And, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And it's so important that Oblong makes these opportunities available for all of us to be a community. And I don't think that there's a book and a person I could be more excited about. It's like candy. Like candy. It's so joyful. I have known Gail. I've had the honor of knowing Gail for 20 years. And I have been a student and read every single book that she's written. She's been a colleague, a co-conspirator, a friend, and a mentor, and a spiritual guide. And when I read this book, I thought to myself, I can't wait to read it a second time, which is a very unusual response to reading a book, because it is so chock full of wisdom and beauty. So Gail.
Thank you, Carla.
I know that you have been working on this book for like 18 years, and it is an integration of your life's work, and today is the official launch of the publication. I just want to get that quick little so how does it feel to launch this beautiful book into the world?
Well, thank you for coming first, all of you. I think most writers can identify with this. I feel happy, relieved, exhausted, a slight postpartum, but mostly very happy and excited. And it's like a transition moment where the writer isn't that important anymore, and now the readers are important, and that's really exciting. It's your book now. It's not my book anymore. So I feel very excited about that part.
Good.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that it's you who's interviewing me, Carla.
Well, we have talked so much about many of the concepts in the book, but I said to Gail the other day as we were preparing for tonight, I said, I have always wondered how you got to be the person you are. And now that I have read the book, I get it. I get it. You have lived these wild, intrepid travel and spiritual adventures. So a central theme of the book is how we can actually find unity through diversity. And you have gone around the world, and the way you describe it in the book with such vivid, beautiful, poetic detail is that each time you're in an unfamiliar place and you gain familiarity, it expands your drum. It expands the sense of unity. So I wish you could talk a little bit about this, about how this kind of paradoxical thing of going towards diversity actually brings about unity.
Yeah. Well, thank you, because that's the whole point of the book. Carla, of course. So the book is really about, as Carla has so beautifully articulated, that contrary to what most of us are taught, by going toward any person, place, value, idea that is different, we become more whole. It actually doesn't threaten our identity. In my view, it completes our identity. So the book is about my journey to become more whole. There's 12 cultures, and we explore these 12 cultures. But also, it's a micro-macro thing, because that was true for me, but I profoundly believe it's also true for the world, that our world as a human family can't complete itself until all the diverse parts and values and members and come together. And another interesting paradox that comes very early in the book is, of course we all know this, but it took me a while to figure this out. So I was drawn to different cultures and people and places very early. I was about 15, and I think I was 16 when I went off on my first wild adventure. So I knew this inexplicable longing to go towards things that I wasn't familiar with. But what I didn't know was that every time I did that, well, guess what? I also became what was unfamiliar. So as I was drawn to the other, I became the other. And in the 12 cultures, I describe this fascination with, well, let's just say Paraguay, which was the first place, my first classroom. And I ended up in a dusty little town with horses and barely any cars, and I thought I was on a Western film set. And this was my first, big encounter, and everybody else was going off to Buenos Aires and Santiago, and, it was very cool. And I land in this completely isolated, quite very poor, and I spoke very little. This was an American field service experience. I spoke, thank you for coming, how wonderful to see you. I spoke very little Spanish, and no one spoke English. And so suddenly, here I was in this dream come true of coming to a new place, and I was totally the other. So that circular lesson of familiarity and unfamiliarity, and how that's what makes us whole, is a main theme in the book.
You talk so often about the people who became your guides, your Sherpas. I wonder if you might say a little bit about how becoming friends with people in other cultures led you to the insights about this. This
That's
theme.
so beautiful, Carla, because this cast of characters in their 12 cultures, and each of them have certain iconic characters. And, we know this because we all travel. It's through these people, they're the portals, the windows into the soul of the place. And I'll go back to Paraguay because it was very paradoxical. So I'm coming into this country that's quite poor and backwards, and I end up as an AFS student in a very, very wealthy family. And I have my own maid. I'm 16, she's maybe 17 or something, and of course she's the one who teaches me everything I need to know. My very wealthy, prestige-oriented family just wanted to impress me, and that wasn't very interesting. But Maria, who's my first iconic window, I'll never forget her. I was very homesick, which of course is another initiation when we go to a place when we're young, especially. She knew I was profoundly homesick, and she would joke, and we would do fun things, and we were great comrades.
Yeah. The person who you met, Wei Wei in China,
Yes,
who said to you, Wei Wei,
Yes, Wei Wei.
said to you that China Americans are egocentric.
Yes.
And China is ethnocentric.
Yes.
And this was a big insight. I'm just curious if you want to say anything
Well,
about that.
I spent about a decade traveling often to China, and Wei Wei was my interpreter. And it turns out that Wei Wei had been the Beatles' interpreter, and Nixon's interpreter, and Billy Graham's interpreter, and all these really important people. And then she gets me, and she's like, at first, who is this woman? But then we become very fast friends. And she says to me one day, if I were American, I'd want to be you. And I say to Wei Wei, well, Wei Wei, if I was Chinese, I would surely want to be you. But she was, I describe in the China chapter, she was a woman in a man's world. She was in the Foreign Office in Beijing, and she could outsmart the old guys network. She was incredible. And all these things we did, really, we weren't important enough to do, but Wei Wei could manipulate the system. So I brought these grassroots groups into China to further cooperation and understanding. They were artistic exchanges, and I brought a group after the Tiananmen Square fiasco in 1989. I had been going to China for many years before that. And before that happened, a trip had already been planned. And then we faced the dilemma, should we go or not go? We were not formal diplomats. We were grassroots activists. And everyone said, don't go, it's too dangerous. Furthermore, if you go, you'll be indicating that you support the Chinese government. So I took my counsel from Wei Wei, my portal into the culture. And Wei Wei said, Gail, the Chinese people need to have contact with the outside world. They need to feel that the rest of the world hasn't forgotten them. That lesson, by the way, went through the Jordanian refugee camps and Russia and India and many of the places I worked. This idea that there's the track one diplomacy, which is our governments, and that's whatever it is. But there's this track two diplomacy, which is, it sounds so simple, but it's so important and so profound. This idea that you mentioned already, Carla, that human-to-human exchange can never be polluted or corrupted or coerced or stolen by track one diplomacy, by government diplomacy, unless we allow it to. So in my case, we went after Tiananmen Square. We went 1 month after Tiananmen Square. There were supposed to be something like 20 of us, and a lot of people said, no, it's too crazy. But so there were these 12 intrepid souls, and we go to China, and we're among the first Westerners to have contact after the Tiananmen Square events. And Wei Wei, intrepid Wei Wei, so, Wei Wei was the one. She somehow, again, was able to circumnavigate the strict channels, and we got to talk to every kind of person. Students, factory workers. She made sure we heard from all sectors of Chinese society, and in that way we had a very full understanding. I'm sorry. I went on too long.
This is exactly, this is the richness of the book. You get to go with her to these places. Like, it is such an amazing adventure in the book. I know we want to hear you read. Before we turn to that, Gail, could you talk a little bit about another big central theme is the metaphor you use is the in-breath and the out-breath. The balance between our interior work, our interior world, and our work in the world, our activism, our connection. The first time I ever heard this metaphor, in-breath, out-breath, was in a very early book.
It was the very first time we met.
And I was like, oh my God, that's it. And so that, while you wrote about it back then, it is a very central
Yes.
theme. Could you talk a little bit about how visiting each of these cultures, what more you learned about this in-breath, out-breath dimension? And I would say so much of the book also involves the story of your parents
Yes.
and their deaths and
Yeah.
what you learned from them and the
Yeah.
interior of your mother and the feminine, the exterior activism of your father.
Yeah.
Anyway, so take it away.
Well, wow, Carla, you keep getting these bullseyes, all these questions. So, well, let me speak about my parents, because the root of the inner and outer is my parents. Well, one thing before that, my friend Abigail Thomas, who's a wonderful writer, who I'm sure most of you know, she once said to me, listen, Gail, almost all writers write about one thing, and that's the one thing. This is my 8th book, and I think we could argue that the one thing that I keep writing about is this balance between wanting to impact the world and make a contribution to the world, and at the same time to care for the interior life, so the contemplative life and the life of activism. So my father was the out-breath, and he taught me, he grew up extremely poor. I describe in the book that during the Great Depression, his father shot himself, and my father was 12 years old. And that, I've written about this before, that was never spoken in my family system except for once. We know this is very common. There's usually a family secret that's not a secret, but runs the whole family, right? Most of us understand that. So my father grew up with this tragedy and also dirt poor, raised by a single mother. And his sense of social justice was acute. And he passed that on to me from a very early age. And then my mother was a mystic. She was a devout Catholic and, you know, told me early on, you know, you see those angels over there and the veil is thin and things like that. So I had this, and my father was an atheist and my mother was a devout Catholic. And though my mother made my father convert and dragged him off to Mass every Sunday, no way, my father was, you know. But they both imparted these core impulses, the interior life and the life of action. So the cultures kind of trace, the book goes girl, woman, crone. Not that original, but it did work. So during girl, woman, crone, I traced the cultures where my interior life was developed. So, for example, Bali, where the sense of an interior life and the life of the imagination is extremely vivid, and the sense of dreams and all these things we think of as the archetypal feminine. Ireland was another place that developed the interior. The Himalayas, which was after my father's death. But then there's, you know, China and Russia, and those places developed my activism and my sense of social justice. Our time in Russia, for example, people sometimes say, what's the favorite chapter for me? I have to say Russia's one of my favorite chapters. We worked there during the Gorbachev years, and this has to do with your question, Carla, and we were quite young, not yet 40. And we work with large groups of 100. They were all visionaries from all over Russia. And when Gorbachev came in, there was the sense of opportunity that we just squeezed in that window to do that work. However, their parents, all these young people our age, had lived through the terrors of Stalin. And in these workshops we led, they described the trauma of their parents. So there were many young people studying psychology, and they said to us, we're studying psychology because we want to understand the PTSD of our parents. We're studying all these things so that their parents never ever talked about this. This is very well known. It was when the great pioneer Virginia Satir went into Russia. It was the first time all the people who had been disappeared and all the people who had been tortured and thrown into prison, that had never been spoken. So I'm saying all this because certain cultures developed. Here I was, I think like around 38 or something. I wasn't naive. I'd already traveled, I'd lived in Africa and stuff like that. But when I was in that room with those 100 Russians, well, first of all, they were supposed to be my enemy. And I was madly in love with these 100 Russians. It was this thing of, you know, what is the enemy? It's just absurd. And so when they began telling these stories, Carla, I felt like, wow, I don't know the world. It was one of those moments where I felt I need to know the world more. As an American, I've been way too protected. And there were many, of course, many moments like that.
Yeah, and you do talk in the book, not that you'll talk about it now, but when you read the book about your training in Marxism, like how all of your United States Western orientation was challenged and transformed with every step of your trip.
Yeah, I thought, you know, I studied Marxism in Paris in 1969, so I thought, wow, I'm going off to Russia, I'll really be a cool cat. My ideas were like so intellectual, and that's okay, but they were so not grounded in the lived experience.
Yeah.
That was a real wake-up call.
And I think that's what happened to you at every stop. You
It
went
did,
in,
Carla.
you know, that's why you traveled towards the other, you got there, you
Yeah.
saw for yourself, and it changed how you, it informed your intellectual understanding.
Yeah, and my heart
And your
too.
heart.
It broke my heart a lot. In India, I think an important story was my colleague Teresa sitting here, and our colleague who we worked with was a visionary pioneer within the sex worker industry in Pune. And the teaching she gave, so she all day long worked with young girls sold into sex trafficking at 10 or 12 years old, stuff like that we all know about. But immediately she became my mentor. That's the other thing. They all became my mentors. Maria was my mentor. Wei Wei was my mentor. I just felt like this avid student when I was with them. So this woman, whose name has been changed in the book, she said, Gail, the thing you have to understand if you're going to do this work is, if you feel sorry for the women you've lost before you've even begun, these are extraordinary human beings. They have this sense of dignity and possibility, and it turned upside down my paradigm about how we view a person who's been through immense suffering and has started in a very rough place.
I think this is the perfect cue for you to do a little reading from the
Okay.
book.
I'm going to read from these papers because I can't see it's too little. But I think I will stand up.
We know how that feels.
I think probably a few others of you. And so I have it in very, very large, very large font. So I'm going to read the prologue because it touches on, there are 12 cultures, and the prologue touches on 6 of those and kind of gives you an overview of the book. So this is called The Calling. Throughout time, myths from every corner of the world have told that at the moment of incarnation, our calling is set before us. During the course of a lifetime, we must choose to heed the call or not. On a full moon, on January 14th, 1949, I come into this world under the sign of Capricorn, but I don't want to stay. I refuse my mother's milk, cow's milk, and several kinds of formula. A tiny being hooked up to life support, I am dying. There appears only a small chance that I will survive until I am given goat's milk. Capricorn, the 10th sign in the zodiac, originates from the constellation Capricornius, which resembles a goat. It is fitting then that I decide only goat's milk will nurture me. Gradually, accepting the Capricorn's goat milk, I begin my mighty fight to survive. As I shuttle between life and death, there appears before me a shimmering, spinning, blue and green globe. It is a presence of powerful luminosity, and it magnetizes me. Now, the spirit globe calls me to enter within its womb. And so it is that I go from my mother's womb into the womb of the globe. A mite of a creature twirling inside the shimmering sphere. I find different brightly colored doorways for exploring, understanding, and enriching this life. Enticing me through the doors, the sparkling spirit globe gives me a glimpse of what awaits me later in life should I choose to live. Through an indigo blue doorway, it's nighttime in the Sahara, where I lie cradled by sand dunes under an avalanche of stars, flooding the great desert with celestial light. And now, the Tuareg nomads' piercing lament joins the djembe drum and the string kora, their transcendent music filling the Sahara with the very soul of the Tuareg, the ancient wisdom of griots, truth-tellers, and healers that the world so desperately needs. A royal purple entrance finds me in a small Balinese village where, in an open-air theater, the fantastical giant barong creature with bulging red lips and a wide sweeping tail parades among us. It is fierce at first, but then sweetly gentle, now joyously laughing, but soon downtrodden, shedding big melancholy tears. It is warning us humans that without a balance between contradictory opposites, all creation falls into chaos. A crimson red gateway opens onto the Great Wall of China, where I sit looking out over this 5,000-year-old civilization, imbued with its stoic, telescopic sense of time, indelibly illuminated by Confucius and Lao Tzu, from craggy mountains to delicate gardens and glorious temples depicted in precious, ageless scrolls. This venerable Middle Kingdom is the center of the world, even today. Spinning, inside the spirit globe, there are so many doors, so many ways to experience life. Going through a door of the purest white, I stand in a courtyard in Moscow, with the sun brilliant against the deep snowbanks. In the corner sit 4 wrinkled Russian babushkas with black shawls covering their heads. Their faces recount stories of revolution and famine, gulags and burned villages. But their bright, boisterous laughter also tells of the Russian soul, ablaze with imagination and mysticism, despite all odds. A fiery orange entryway finds me in South India, sitting in an open-air amphitheater with the night illumined by bonfires as the gods Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva perform their ancient Hindu myths of creation, preservation, and destruction. Even today, the story of India reinventing itself once again, creating the new as it destroys the old, demonstrates how chaos and contradiction lead to transformation. With the sparkling lights of Jerusalem across the Dead Sea, an emerald green portal opens into a Jordanian valley, where I walk past a village mosque as the call to prayer rings out. Here, in the cradle of civilization, the Bedouins' ancient code of hospitality provides shelter for those without a homeland, teaching that with the strength of character to endure the harshest trials, we become honorable teams. From inside the womb of the globe, I decide I want to know this place, to follow the blue and green grail wherever it takes me. I want to live, I say to the shimmering spirit. In response, the glimmering globe announces my calling. You shall live, and you shall travel far away from home and all that is familiar, so that you experience the miraculous diversity of the human family. Only by unifying what is familiar to you with all that is different will you become whole. You will learn this for yourself, but also so that you can teach it to the world. For the world, too, can only complete itself by finding unity within its diversity. With those words, the spirit globe departs as I begin my life on this earth. But I will remain in the womb of the globe for my entire life, journeying through its many portals as I become whole. This is the story of how I followed my calling. This is my love letter to the world.
We need a love letter. We need a love letter. We're going to have some time for questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap up with one or two more questions if there's time from me, which I really trying hard not to steal your time. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. So inspiring. I can't wait to read your book. What organizations were you traveling with? You mentioned the U.S. Field Service and some activist organizations.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what offices you
Well,
traveled with.
when I was young, in the girl part, the main organizations were the American Field Service, and then I spent my junior year abroad at the Sorbonne, and then I was in the Peace Corps in West Africa. And then my husband and I founded an institute called the Empowerment Institute. And what's interesting about that is we were quite young. It was 44 years ago. A lot of you have heard the story, and the story's in the book. So we were hippies and all that. And we sit at our little kitchen table. This was like way long, decades before computers. We have yellow legal pads and pencils. And, we're about to get married, and we're saying, what's your life about? My husband's name is David. And he says, well, I like this idea of empowerment. It was 1980, and the word was not abused and overused, and now it's kind of it's not so meaningful anymore. But back then it was kind of a new word, and we were young, and you know how we are when we're young. We just said, okay, let's. It was the early beginning of the human potential movement. Omega was just beginning. I was back in the beginning of that when it first started, before it was in Rhinebeck. And so David and I joined this rather audacious group of people who said, there's more potential to us than we're utilizing. And our contribution was this empowerment thing. The reason this relates to your very good question is that very same workshop that started at places like Omega and the light centers here, Esalen and Kripalu and like that, here in the Western world, by the time you get to my stories in Russia and India and Jordan and China, that exact same workshop became relevant to sex workers, to immigrants, to, I could say, the most disenfranchised people in the world. So that's a very interesting part of the book. Our work is really about agency. How does a person claim their agency? Like the concept of my hero, Paulo Freire. He says, in the pedagogy of the oppressed, if a person who's disenfranchised wants to be free, they have to take back their agency. So we started this agency thing at a little table right here in the Hudson Valley on a yellow pad. But the thing about agency is, if it is a valid idea, it should work for anybody, anywhere in the world, no matter what their circumstances are. So the most rewarding thing about, I think I haven't answered your question, I've gone off on a tangent.
You're getting there, that's okay.
But the thing I really wanted to say was that most of the stories are through our Empowerment Institute, but that wasn't how we started out. We thought, well, it will be exciting enough if this is helpful to people in the Western world. But really, our real teachers were the people in Afghanistan and faraway places.
Can I prompt a little part of the answer?
Yeah,
Because I think
yeah.
the Earth, the run, can you talk about that? Because it was a creature of the empowerment. And
The Earth Run.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's really took you, yeah.
So that was my husband's crazy idea. And, I mean, I'm a little bit crazy, but he's like really crazy.
I know.
Like
Yes.
really,
I
really.
attest.
So,
With
no,
love.
I mean, he's just a visionary, that's what I really mean. So he said, we'd been married for a couple years, he said, and he had been the director of the Olympic torch relay in Lake Placid, and he saw the power of the torch as an archetype. So he comes to me one day and says, Gail, this is a true story, I would like to take a torch around the world for world peace. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay, so how are you going to do that? Who's going to pay? And as, you know, a quintessential visionary, he says to me, I have no idea, but we'll do it. And it's true, exact words. And so we spent 3 years, and then eventually UNICEF was our partner, and we raised many millions of dollars for the kids, and we went to 45 countries, and there was something like 30 heads of state, and it was on ABC. And so you see these crazy visionaries, you sort of have to pay attention to them.
Do we have another question? Go ahead.
So Gail, this book is tremendous testimony to your life and your life's work. My question is on the personal side of how it was for you to write this book.
Yeah.
I know there's many writers in the room.
Yeah.
And what you learned about yourself in
That's
that
such a good
process.
question, Sonia. Thank you. You know, I think a lot of you have heard me say this. I know Carla has. This didn't start out as a memoir. I don't come to memoir easily. I have written one memoir that was really to grieve my mother. But, so I thought this would be like some really nice travel essays, like take people on some, you know, fun adventures through the Himalayas, like this. And then Nan Satter, who's here, I had many editors on this book, and the early editors said, this is not travel essays, but it was like huge, like this big old thing. And then, so I showed it to my friend, who is also an editor and was kind of a legendary agent, Ned Levitt. I said, Ned, I'm either going to throw this away or you have to help me. It was unwieldy. And so Ned said, I'll help you. Wow. Well, he didn't know what he was getting into. So long story short, I, like many writers and many people, I have boxes and boxes of journals, like so many boxes. And I began to review the journals. I'm not the kind of person who reviews my journals. I write them because it helps me understand things, but there were so many boxes. And like just to go back to Russia, I had never read, since we were there in the Gorbachev years, I had never read what I wrote then. So to answer your question, Sonia, what began to happen, it seems so obvious, but maybe I was a little slow. I'm 76 now, and I wrote this book in my 70s. And I began to see, okay, this is a very careful life review. It wasn't my original impulse, but actually, as many people who are my age and older will tell you, it's an invaluable process. So then something was charged up in me. I said, okay, I might die before I finish, but but at least the process of reviewing my life, like Carla's asked many questions about the threads that kept going through my life. I knew it intellectually, but not spiritually and emotionally and even viscerally. And so by the time I finished it, I felt like I completed my karma. I'm not saying I want to die or anything. I have a few more books I'd like to write, actually. But I finished that dharma. The dharma of empowerment completed itself. And that was very valuable. But it was a very hard book. Someone asked me the other day, when it was hard, it was a room where there were a lot of writers, and they said, what do you do when it's hard as a writer? And I said, a lot of times, I'm sure this is true for other people here, around 3 or 4 in the morning, the veil is very thin then. The Dalai Lama said that's the time when prayer is most potent. I get a lot of guidance then. And one time we couldn't, with Ned, we couldn't land the framework. We had all the stuff and all these cultures, but it wasn't elegant. And I was like 3:30 or something. And girl, how did I call it in the books? Because it told me exactly. Girl being formed, woman taking form, crone passing on the form. Oh, that sounds so simple, but it's a big deal. The whole structure of the book. So to remove the ego personality when things are hard, I mean, everyone knows that, but that certainly has been my experience. There's a much, we know that the writing, all of us, there's an incredible poet amongst us tonight, and we all know that any creative art, it's from a place so much more vast than, there are no words for it. And so I think if in the difficult moments, if I open to that vast intelligence, I would then trust Sonia that the book, the universe wanted the book to get written. It wasn't just my puny little ego. You see what I'm saying?
We have time for one more, but then I have one. So don't make it too long.
I won't. I'm too long-winded.
No, it's beautiful. It's all about you.
So Gail, I love the little maps.
Oh, I'm so glad
Characters.
you talked about the
And
maps.
I forgot.
Will
I
Lytle.
forgot to tell you that.
Will Lytle, yes.
They were so helpful, and I would look at them as I was starting a chapter, and then as I was finishing, I would go back and figure them all out.
It makes me
They
so
were
happy.
delightful.
Okay, so I am so glad you talked about that. Did you want to say anything else?
No, I just want to say, how did they happen?
So, these are extraordinary.
They really are.
This illustrator who was with me the other day, his name is Will Lytle. He lives here in the Hudson Valley. He's a wizard. He's a bit of a hermit. He lives in a little hermit cabin in the woods. He grows all his own food. He's an unbelievable, magical character. So way back in the day, when we still had the Woodstock Times, which I still miss, I read this article about this guy named Will Lytle, and he would make these little magical creatures in houses, and he would drop them on doorsteps, just random doorsteps. I said, I have got to know this guy. and I kept looking him up. It turns out he lives 10 minutes from my house. And so when I was writing this book, I always was intrigued by him, and his work is extraordinary, very refined, very, very out of the box. And so Ned, my editor, said, Gail, where are your photos? It's a memoir. Bring the photos out. We got to have photos. I said, Ned, I don't have any photos. We're the only people on earth who don't take photos, me and David, but we don't take photos. But I said, I have this idea. But I want Will Lytle to do these maps. So I thought, you know, he's a hermit, he'll never say yes, he's like off in the woods. But what happened is he was very close friends with Carol Zaloom, who illustrated another book that I wrote. And so he knew I was okay. And so I asked him, and then he started. And I love that you went back and you looked. So what he did is we decided on these portals for each culture. And then he did these, we're going to make cards because people have been loving these. They're just amazing. They're very original, and they, I think it's the visual soul of the book.
Exactly.
And what he's done, which is genius, is he's captured the iconic images of the cultures. So I wish he was here tonight, but I'm doing a little reading in Woodstock, and he will come. He's shy. He doesn't, you know, he likes his woods. But I will tell him, Linda, that you said
They
that.
were just so beautiful, and they
Yeah.
really, they enhanced my reading of the book.
Oh, I'll definitely tell him that. Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I similarly, I look at the pictures and then I went to Google Map.
Oh, he'll
Because
love
I
you did
wanted
that.
to like see where it really, you know, my own understanding of geography is so
Yeah.
poor.
Yeah.
And then I told Gail, I go to Spotify and I look, because she talks a lot about the music and the instruments of every place.
Yeah.
And I'd go to Spotify and I would play the music of the instruments she was talking about. And it was just so amazing. I said to her, you gotta have a playlist. She said, oh, we have it, it's coming. So I wanna close
Yes.
with
Yes.
a question that I do feel is a through line of your work. It really showed up in the Ashokan Way. And it was
Yes.
like the Ashokan Way, which is every day, something about her walk on the Ashokan Way and how the natural landscape, she is in it and it is in her, and she talks a lot about that relationship.
Yeah.
And that really shows up in this book. The book is doing so many things, but one of the things it's doing is describing in this exquisite detail that you heard in her reading of the opening, the vividness of the landscape and the relationship between the landscape and your own interior unfolding.
Mm.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's a great question, Carla. I think particularly Ireland and the Himalayas and their particular culture, the Sahara, of course, where the landscape is the teacher. And interestingly, who can make this sort of thing up? I entered the Sahara 3 months after my mother dies, and I entered the Himalayas barely a month after my father dies. So these two mystical locations become the sort of the backdrop for my parents' death. Now, I mention them because the land is so important in those. I think the land, you've mentioned all of them, Carl. The land, the arts, so all music, all storytelling, all books, all poetry, all art, and kindred spirits. So people ask me, well, how can you actually believe that we can get along as a human family? You know, there's so much cynicism now and so much discord. To me, there are these primordial archetypal realms, such as the land, such as all the arts. That's what the Traoreg taught. They said you know, when they face drought and starvation, they don't get depressed. They make music or art or poetry. It's like, yeah. So, and then these people you've mentioned, Carla, like Weiwei and people like that. But I think the land is one of the predominant places where we experience our common humanity. Whether we're in the beauty of the Catskills and the Hudson Valley, or the Sahara, or the Himalayas, or Ireland, or any of these places. The land is a unifying factor. The land is a teacher of unity in diversity. The land is so wildly, unbelievably diverse, and yet the sense of what we sense in the land is the same.
So beautiful. Is there anything else you want to say about what you hope people will take away from the book?
Well, it's very new, so this switch from writer to no more writer, it's reader, is quite new. But I keep hearing it's a great adventure. So, you know, like it's really kind of a wild adventure. So you can go on this fun and wild adventure. I hope that that's true. But I also think it's an extremely hopeful book, and that every story is a testament or a testimonial to how we need each other. In the last chapter, I talk about these questions that I traveled with my whole life, and they answer your question, I think, Carla. And I say, so think about our human family. So anywhere you go, anywhere, and how does that person respond to suffering? How do they make art? How do they stay in community? What do they do when someone dies? How do they respond when there's an inexplicable tragedy? What is social justice to them? How do they respond to the crisis of the earth? I mean, we cannot answer these questions from one cultural perspective. It will never happen. The perspectives on these massive, important existential questions need every single person in the human family. That's the point of the book, is that I think that's why it gives hope, because we learn that together we can figure it out. Alone, I don't think so. But with each other, we can figure it out. So that's something I hope.
It is such a magnificent book. Not only is it rich with hope and wisdom, it is an adventure.
Yeah,
That's why I want to read it again.
It really is.
Like, I don't have to go to all these places. But I learned so much about these cultures and the music and the art and the beauty and all of the things that you just talked about. Anyway, so Gail,
Thank you,
we
Carla.
celebrate you.
Thank
We
you,
celebrate
Carla.
this book, and thank you all for coming.
And you can buy a book, and that happens there, I think, right, and then I'll happily sign.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
You're
very,
welcome.
very much for coming.
Thank you.